Okay, so let's get right into it. Today we're going to unpack this really powerful idea called the Disobedience Premium, and it gets to the heart of a question that costs companies billions.
And that question is this: why do the smartest, wealthiest, most well-resourced companies, the ones who should know better, consistently miss the biggest breakthroughs? It's a pattern you see over and over again.
I mean, think about it. The personal computer, it didn't come out of the shiny, super-funded labs at IBM, the absolute giant at the center of the universe back then. Nope, it came from the periphery, from two college dropouts just messing around in a garage.
Or, hey, let's look at something more recent. Decentralized finance. Probably the biggest financial shakeup in a decade. Did it come from Wall Street? From the New York Stock Exchange or Goldman Sachs? No way. It came from a mechanical engineer who literally taught himself to code by reading stuff on Reddit. This isn't a fluke. It's the norm.
So what is going on here? This pattern points to something called the innovation paradox. And lucky for us, there's a framework that actually explains why it's so often chaos, not some carefully laid out 5-year plan that fuels the really big leaps forward.
And that framework is called the Disobedience Premium. Now, this isn't just about, breaking rules for fun. It's about a very specific set of structural conditions that actually reward people for breaking the rules and for defecting from the old way of doing things. And that's where massive value gets created.
So this whole framework is built on 5 key ingredients, or structural fractures. You can think of them as the 5 things that have to be in place for this magic to happen. You need all 5, from a failure floor that makes it cheap to fail, all the way to a defection bonus that makes it profitable to leave the old system behind.
Okay, so a theory is one thing, but does it actually hold up in the real world? Let's open up the case files and look at 3 companies I'm pretty sure you've heard of: Uber, Apple, and this crypto protocol called Uniswap.
First up, Uber. I mean, they're the textbook example of exploiting what the framework calls the gray window. They didn't ask for permission. They just launched right into this regulatory void where the rules for ride-sharing just didn't exist yet. Their entire strategy was about speed. Get so big, so fast, that you basically get to write the rules yourself.
But wow, that kind of disobedience has a price tag, and it is a steep one. According to our source material, Uber has paid something like $2.7 billion in fines and legal settlements. So yeah, the gray window can work, but you better believe the bill eventually comes due.
Now let's talk about a different kind of rule breaking. Our next case is probably one of the most famous stories in all of tech, and it's a perfect illustration of the defection bonus. So back in 1979, Steve Jobs gets a tour of Xerox's research lab, and he sees 2 incredible technologies that they weren't really doing anything with: the graphical user interface and the mouse.
Jobs basically took those concepts, made them way better, and built the Macintosh around them. The result? Fast forward to 2023, and Apple's revenue was a staggering $383 billion, an entire empire built on ideas that it took from somebody else.
And what about Xerox, the company that actually invented all that cool stuff? Their revenue was just under $7 billion. See, the system at Xerox was totally incapable of breaking from its core business. But the system out in Silicon Valley rewarded Apple for doing exactly that.
All right, our final case, this crypto protocol Uniswap, is so fascinating because it basically embodies all 5 fractures at the same time. It was super cheap to build, it was created by a total outsider, it launched into a regulatory no man's land, it's really easy for other people to copy, and it gives massive rewards to users for leaving traditional finance. It's the absolute perfect storm of disobedient innovation.
And what happens when you get all 5 of those fractures lined up perfectly? Well, at the time this source material was written, Uniswap had processed over $2 trillion in trading volume. That's the mind-blowing power of a system that's built from the ground up to reward disobedience.
But look, this framework isn't some magic wand you can wave everywhere. Not every industry rewards chaos, and it's really important to understand where this whole disobedience premium idea starts to break down and, where rule breaking just becomes flat-out destructive.
Just think about the contrast here. On one side, you've got the wild chaos of something like Uniswap. On the other, you've got the incredible discipline of Toyota, a giant built on relentless, tiny, incremental improvements. In industries like manufacturing that move pretty slowly, it's discipline, not disobedience, that wins the day.
And this framework has a dark side, a dark mirror. Theranos. Elizabeth Holmes, she exploited the exact same regulatory grain window as Uber, but with one, let's say, crucial difference. She didn't actually have a product that worked. And this just goes to show that the very same conditions that can enable amazing innovation can also enable massive fraud.
The premium is for real disruption, not just pretending you have it. So this all leads us to the central paradox when it comes to innovation. You can create all the right conditions, right? You can build the perfect stage. But you can never, ever script the breakthrough performance itself.
And this brings us to this really powerful quote from our source. The most dangerous form of disobedience is the kind you can schedule. When big companies try to force this stuff with their innovation labs or disruption days, it just becomes theater. It loses the very chaos and unpredictability that made it valuable in the first place.
So, what's the big takeaway here? You can't just produce disobedience on demand. You can only create the conditions for it. Your job as a leader is to build a right environment, lower that failure floor, open up the exits, and then you have to trust that the breakthrough is going to show up on its own schedule, not yours.
So I'll leave you with a final thought from this whole explainer. I want you to look at your own company or your own team and just ask one honest question. Around here, is failure a lesson or is it a career-ending event? The answer to that question is going to tell you everything you need to know about your potential for a real breakthrough.